Hey people, I posted an excellent movie yesterday and I didn't like the quality, so if you were watching it and it cut off, it's because I had re-uploaded it in a better quality. It's easier to see. So about the end of it, I was showing the meaning of the sun's land, which in Hebrew would be pronounced the vineyards, Vyarx, the vineyards. And it's not of the sons, it's just plain the sun, the vineyards. Your son's land would be a vineyard. And so I was real curious of how they would write that in the Greek and in the Latin. And I say Latin is the hardest language to learn. And the reason is because they've got it all backwards. They tried to change the meaning of words because they didn't want people to know what this actually says. But I'm going to read this Latin here, which is just ancient English poetry. All three of these languages are ancient English poetry. The Hebrew come first, and it reads different ways. And so they really couldn't do that when they come back with the Greek and wrote a parody. But it was still genius. And then the Latin was fairly genius in its day, too, where they were trying to blend the two books together. But I'm going to do something I seldom do. I'm going to read this Latin here. And the best way to learn Latin is watch Roadrunner. And that's the type of Latin this is. It's poetry. It's not the way people talked in the day. It's the way poets put out information in a humorous way. So I put the Latin and the Greek and the Hebrew, as it's written. I didn't arrange any of the words. But when they wrote it, there is some word changes, and they change positions, so it doesn't exactly line up. But, ergo is work. It's where the word Virgo and Berg, that work, and ergonomics is where all that come. And so this is a missit, ergo. The missit work, none it is. The I-O, the same as in the Greek and in the Hebrew. The I-O just reads as the E. And the missit work, none it is ad blame. And ad is a play. You'll see it across from the at, usually in the Hebrew. You'll see it down here where sometimes the A words read backwards and it's a to. And that's what add means. When you add it something up, then it's to. It's added to. And you can read that as a to, or you can just read it as an add and know that's what it means, is to. And miss it work, none it is to blame. And so to miss it work, none it is to blame means I don't go to work and I don't even have a reason I didn't show up for work. And none it is to blame. And miss it ergo, none it is to blame. A phylum bore areolum, why habit of that? This is like habitat, but this is a have it of at. Means you own it, not just living there, but that's the way you got it. Hey, I got it like that. I can miss work with no reason. And miss its work, none it is to blame. A phylum. And so that's when you're filing the earth life, and it goes in its order, in its class, in its order, in its family, that type. It's a son of, it's under the type of the bore areolum. And so this areolum is the Latin word. They're using it to replace the pedora. And the same over here in the Hebrew, pedora. So areolum has two meanings. And areolum is this little suction cup on the end of an insect's foot that helps it walk up glass. But it's also a yarn as in a story, a tale. And a pedora is also, a pedora has a couple meanings. A pedora is a beard on a man's neck. It could mean unkept. He doesn't tighten up his neck, doesn't shave the hair off his neck. And it's also the hat that you'll see the mafia wearing. But both these words are also used for a storyteller or a fortune teller. And miss it ergo, none it is to blame. A phylum, and that type bore areolum, and created a story. Why? The QU, you can replace it with a W and read that as a Y. The same over here as this Y in Hebrew. Y in Old English meaning how or who, and who have it of at. Who habit of at, does it all the time, owns it. A superflumen terrace philoria, a philora mummian. And that's some of that Road Runner Latin. Superflumen is overflowing. A flu, a bottom of, the bottom of is a river or a valley, at the bottom of the mountains. But the superflumen is overflowing, and his bullshit story is habitat, and miss a worker, none it is to blame. The phylum, the type that bore a story, who habit of at, overflowing, a terrace phylor mummian. And so the terrace, the AE reads the ES. And a terrace is, you see the old terraces in South America, the old terrace gardens. And if you've seen that movie I showed you yesterday, if you look up in those wadis, you'll see terraces built in the wadis. When there's not a lot of water there, they build terraces across the wadi, the old dry river bottom, so they can catch all the little bit of water that comes through. And so the superfluum and the superfluum terrace of phile, philo, that was my grandma's name, Philomene. Philo meaning love, the lover, the philor, the lover. Filio reads the E-E-R, a filer, a lover, mummion. And that's a Latin way of writing mummy, M-A-M-Y-O-N, a mummy, a motherfucker, is to call him. That's what they call him. A misitergo, none it is to blame. A phylum bore areolum, why habit of at, a superflumen terrace philorum mummian. What vocurrent, and that's like mixing the word, W-H-A-T, same word as the Hebrew, what, and vocal, what speaks, and like coherent and understood, what word understood, rent, what word used. This is his name up here. This is all what you would call him, what to call, what vocurent, whom, H-U-M, as in W-H-O-M, whom, him, whom it discernent, the one it fits. And this SC here, I believe that this second C reading is an I, and I believe it's read as, an E is the H, and the K-I-E, like in the Greek, the K-A-I, I read as a Vav, a U, a W. I believe that's the way that's read, is who. And who aggresses us. And who aggresses us is a populace. And this aggresses, the first time you see that word, I think it was in the Hebrew Bible, when he kicked them out of the land of Eden, and aggresses and goes back. And who aggresses us is populace, and pushes back this population, this populace, and excess, EX, and the AE reads the ESE, and excess gift to. The gift, GYPT is a gift, a GIFT, and excess, too many, a gift to. And then the QUI, reading is Y, meaning how or who, and Y over with, UIT or WITH, what it looks like, and Y over it, superficial terrace, settings contra me. And so it looks like, the superficium is like a super over and a phisum. The IE reading is a U, and superphisum, the terrace, and settings contra me, against me. So it's talking about when the river overflows, and the overflowing terrace. The terraces are the dams, and a motherfucker is what we call them. And so when the river flooded, everybody come out of the Nile Valley, and these were the Pedoras, the unkept, and who aggresses its populace, and pushes back the people. Excess, EXES, too much a gift of, that's too many. Hey, we like some people, but we don't want 10 million Mexicans running over the border, and excess the gift to. I was showing you in that map of the Exodus in that movie yesterday, where they have all these sons' land up on this wadi, sons' land as in vineyards. And on the other side of the mountain, you'll see it mostly. This is running up, and when it gets to the top of the mountain, they'll cross over and come down the other side. And the ones that are a little steeper, they have them terraced. They have some terraces across here, but you see a lot more on the steeper. The steeper the water, the more terraces they'll put in it. This wadi runs up here, and then when they get up so far, there's no more vineyards. And then they'll go on around. They'll miss the peak, but this is up the top. They'll come down the other side of the mountain, and then you find another wadi running down. And here's another one I had marked over here. But on this steeper side of the mountain, you'll see more of the terraces. You'll see a vineyard here, and this isn't as much of a terrace. This is a whole dam built over here. But it's not going to hold water above. It's just going to hold enough water so they can water their vineyard. And you'll see these ancient vineyards all the way up to 3,000 foot, I believe, is about the highest you see them. They build some terraces around them so when the water gets too high, which isn't often, it'll hold the water out. But they also build terraces across when they can to hold some water in. But yeah, there's a wadi I didn't go down. I didn't look before, but yeah, you see all these ancient vineyards and farms up in these wadis, up in these mountains. This is 2,800 foot up here. And you can see a dam here. These are terraces built to hold some water. He got a good spot. It's not real wide. He put a dam across here to hold some water in his garden. But that's what I was talking about in that movie yesterday. The Exodus didn't take 40 years. It meant he worked 40 years in a row. He would make a trip out here to work the vineyards. Way up here in the top of the mountains, here they got a Greek Orthodox monastery, it says. The nuns' monastery. Yeah, the nuns are making wine up here too. Up at 2,100 foot. And I imagine this is one of the ancient trails here because they got the a paved road runs all the way up it. But this is one of the long ones. It doesn't run so steep. You see it here at 1,300 feet. And it probably starts about 700 feet here. But this is all the sun's land, the vineyards. But these terraces, they don't just catch the water, they catch the sediment running down. You're going to need more topsoil for your garden. And here's a spot you can see an ancient one. Here's a bigger dam. And then under here you see a terrace. A bunch of terraces going across to catch the sediment. It makes a turn here. You see a whole bunch of terraces in here. All across here. These are all terraces catching sediment. And this is up in the northern part. Over with superficium terrace, the settings contra me, the settings against me. The settings against the sediment. So a wise man once said, I like poetry, I don't understand it. And it's because it's broad, it's talking about all life. It's talking about people. It's talking about gardens. It's talking about soil. It talks about the soil as the people that aggress. But I'm not going to make this too long, but I want to show you this. And I figured out this word, messengers. I'm sure it doesn't always read like this. But, and he sent messengers to Balaam. And it's wise, meaning whose or hows or whose, W-I-S. And who's'll, W-I-S-L, who's'll, wise'll, hows will, and come, H-M. A come and the L followed by the A is an N. A come knock 'em. And wise'll come knock 'em. And he sent the messengers, the one that's knocking on your door. Wise'll come knock 'em. And so when you're reading the A words backwards, you're ignoring this tack, and it's the L is followed by the A, and it's an N, and it's the noble, the royal. Wise'll come knocking, a noblem, the royal family. And so that's across from the Latin where it says, and miss it ergo, none it is to blame. And misses work with no reason. I don't need an excuse. The noble. And in the Greek, it's a festile. Oh, I was at a big party. It was a fest. Monday morning we were partying Saturday. And a festile, pressing his pros blame, fors blame. And I'm going to cut this off here. Good day.